we have evidence which exists now, a paper, a manuscript written on old Arab paper from Zayla. It is kept in one Persian library. He mentioned at the end, at the colophon, at the end of the text, this manuscript was published, handwritten in Zayla, where we are.
Preservation, documentation, and digitalization. So thank you very much, everyone who's in the panel. And just to give a very small introduction about the panelists, we have first Mr. Yukunu Amlak Mesgabu from the Director of Ethiopian National Archives and Library Agency. And we have next to me Hassan Kawo, who is Dean of the Arabic Department at Addis Ababa University, and he is a scholar and researcher on manuscripts research in the Horn of Africa with a lot of experience in it, which we will come back to it. And next to me here also we have Dr. Nuruddin Aman, who is a member of the Ethiopian Studies Institute, focusing on manuscripts research. And you all know Dr. Jama Muse Jama, which I don't need to introduce, but the director of Porgesa Cultural Center and a principal researcher in the research that we are presenting here today. So we will be talking about a research that has been conducted in collaboration between the two institutions, bringing in scholars from the Addis Ababa University and from here. So just to start with, I'll give the chance to Dr. Jama to give us a brief understanding of the initiative and what the research about, and then we continue from that.
Thank you so much, Tirsit, and thank you. I understand that Hargeisa is becoming also hot. So for those who are resisting, since in the morning for the continuation of the panels, why Islamic manuscripts, why Hargeisa Cultural Center started this project that Tirsit has mentioned. The reason is not only on Somaliland or in Ethiopia in this case, but the problem of Islamic manuscript is knowledge production had a difficulty that's coming, that has one route coming all the way from the study on book in general, in the written culture. People misunderstood when we are talking Islamic manuscripts and make synonymous as Islamic manuscripts equal Islam in religion, scholarship, which is not the case. It is just simply because of the people who produced it were Islamic scholars. So the books that we are talking about, the manuscripts that we are talking about, could be a range of astronomy, knowledge, education, every aspect of knowledge production, including Islamic as a religion studies. So that's one misunderstanding about Islamic manuscript study. The second point, which is fundamental, it's coming from Arabic scholars, in Islam, who consider it manuscripts produced in Africa as a peripheric, not so important scholarship in Islam. So they didn't consider important the knowledge that has been produced by African scholars who were based in Africa. And when they produced those manuscripts talking about Islam, but also not only as a religion, they didn't consider important. So they considered Islamic scholarship, those books produced not in Africa, because of they considered preferred, done by scholars in the Gulf zone, basically in Persian and Gulf area. And the Western scholars who continued to study, they referred simply what has been produced by those scholars. So automatically Islamic manuscripts and Islamic knowledge production in Africa has been ignored for long time. That's why they became completely invisible. Here you have some of examples of the manuscripts that we are talking about, and the gallery in here behind me, there are some important books that has been published definitely between Berbera and Zayla up to Herar, because of that's where they are coming from, the kind of material that has been produced. And it has been done in 1800. And everyone would say that in Somaliland, we are an oral society, so we don't have written culture. False, because of someone was producing those books, those Arabic written works in the region. So that's the two things why we felt that we have to do something. And it's not only starting from Hargeisa and from Ethiopia in this case, but it is awakened for the last decade that African scholars felt that we have to bring back that knowledge and put in its own place. So that's why we started, and the Hargeisa Cultural Center started quite by accident, because we got some of those books in a Qadriya shrine in Berbera. For those who know Berbera, Sheikh Yusuf Mamma shrine, where luckily those manuscripts were preserved for long time. And they have never been documented in the scholarship. So starting from there, then going through Ethiopia, where we would speak what happened, going all the way to Jimma, we realized that there are important books, important manuscripts, important knowledge that has been ignored for a long time. So why not to do? That's why the project started from here, has a reason to exist.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jama. I'll come back to the details of the others. To bring back to Dr. Yukuno, as a National Archive and Library Agency, what are the manuscripts status and the research collaboration that are happening going on? If you could shed light on that.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Yukuno Amlak from the Ethiopian National Archives. Most of what can be said about the purpose of the collaborative project is described by Dr. Jama. One point that I might add is that the National Archives of Ethiopia, besides being a legally instituted body to oversee whatever is produced in Ethiopia across centuries, it was, in a manner of speaking, it was a kind of very passive in terms of going out, making appraisals and collections, with the exception of a few attempts in the 60s that happened where we have tens of thousands of Christian manuscripts microfilmed and collected, added into the national collection. So with our collaboration with the Hargeisa Cultural Center, what we did is we went to one of the very active Islamic centers in Ethiopia, where there have been tremendous intellectual activity, tremendous writing and reading. What I would like to say is this is really a very humbling experience for us, because there is this unchecked perception that people read better today than before. But what we realized is that even though we have more number of people, more portion of our population with the capability to read and write today than ever before, but the reading culture was at its strongest in the past. This is what we realized, because you go to a very shabby countryside home and you find a library, a full-fledged library. And as Dr. Jama said, these libraries didn't contain religious texts only. They had so many other historical documents, cultural documents, agricultural knowledge, all sorts of knowledge were kept in these manuscripts. So the National Archives is really grateful for this kind of collaborative effort, because it opened our eyes to the fact that we need to do a lot, not just to go forward, but also to be coupled with our past, with our heritage, in terms of the reading culture that we have. This is one thing. I think in another round I might say a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuno, and thank you very much, Dr. Jama, also for bringing the aspect of these manuscripts being considered something isolated, non-existent, or even using them as a counter-narrative to the depiction or the presentation of communities. On basing that, I will come back to you, Nuruddin, as a person who is working on Islamic manuscripts and research in this area, and manuscripts in general. How do you see the research activities going on, and how does it present Islamic scholars or manuscript calligraphers in the region in general?
Okay, that's good. The region of the Horn Africa, particularly Ethiopia, Somaliland, Djibouti, and Eritrea, has so many rich manuscripts, both in Islam and Christianity. So this has its own influences. Basically, as you know, that the first relation that is Islamically between Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia, particularly starting from the 7th century, during the advent of Islam in the region, has so shaped so many things in the region. Following this population mobility from Hijaz and the surrounding regions who came here, particularly in the Dahlak area, Barbara and the Zayla has also shaped the literary traditions and teaching, learning systems in the region. We have also saw several things that may influence the literary corpus of the region, like the arrival of different walis, scholars, like the arrival of Sheikh Hussein in the southeastern part of the present Bali, and the arrival of Sheikh Abadir, also called Umar Redda in Harar, as well as some very figure scholars like Sheikh Ismail Al-Jabarti, Aubar Kadle, and Sheikh Ishaq himself has so played major roles in teaching learning services. Following this, their followers also has produced so several manuscripts in both secular and non-secular issues. We have so many traders, merchants, particularly caravan traders, who played and shaped the literary corpus of the region. So we have so different things in this area, very common things. We as an Ethiopia, and particularly as a Horn African citizens, we shared so many histories, cultural heritages, that this cultural heritage has not got careful attentions both by modern scholars and other practitioners. Having think this, we, together with the Hargeisa Cultural Center and Ethiopian National Library Agency and Addis Ababa University, had did a great project, particularly in Western Ethiopia, also called the Gibeah Status, to cover the uncovered area, to explore the most ignored and neglected regions. So we got a different manuscripts from this area. Maybe I will give the detailed typologies of those manuscripts. But due to this rich heritage, we aspire to do a deep investigations in this area.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And definitely we'll come back to the research that's ongoing now. But to bridge up this one, Dr. Hassan, I know you have worked a lot on manuscripts in the Horn of Africa, but not only in the Horn of Africa, also you were part of the researchers covering or looking into Timbuktu in the Western Africa. So on the basis of that, if you could share with us what are the research initiatives going on, what are the stronger by then, and what has changed, and how this kind of research is going to put an input into it.
Okay, thank you very much. صباح ونكسن. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا حسن محمد. When we discuss about African literary heritage, it is everywhere in Africa, North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, even South Africa is a center of knowledge production, center of book making. We have many evidences from all parts of Africa. So if you take, for example, West Africa, where it's studied well by scholars like John Hanwick, in the 1960s, that is the time when West Africa attracted attention of manuscript. So they found many literary work, religious and non-religious, like secular texts in West Africa. They start documenting, cataloging, and studying also in different themes. That was documented as ALA. There is a catalog which is done by Hanwick as ALA, that is in West Africa. Then when you come to East Africa, it was also started by Ofahi, East African workers from all Horn Africa, and now continued by research in Islamic Horn Africa by Dr. Alexandro Gori and his team, and also continued by Hargeisa team, Ethiopian National Archive, Addis Ababa University. The research is going on. So if you take Timbuktu in history, it is a center of enlightenment in 16th century. You can take, for example, Ahmed Baba Institute, the 16th century scholar. Now, when you visit Timbuktu, you get a library named after this big and famous scholar, Ahmed Baba Library. You can find about 30,000 manuscripts. When we say manuscript, what is manuscript? Manuscript means handwritten text, handwritten. This means we have a literature, handwritten legacy, pre-print tradition. We are talking about pre-print tradition, but also continued until present time, after even innovation of print. So West Africa, you can find where Imam Suyuti visited. There is a library named Imam Suyuti Library. Why they call it Imam Suyuti? Because they believe that Imam Suyuti was there in that specific place. So there are many libraries like Mama Haidara Library. Each center has many collections. That is in Timbuktu. When you go to the Jene, another center of enlightenment since 16th century, you find a lot of heritage, written heritage in this part of the world. This dispel the notion that say Africa is oral tradition, not rights. Africa writes. They write, they had written in many areas. They have literature as creative writing. They have literature in science, written material in science, in religion, in many aspects. When you come to the Horn Africa, you can take Harar as knowledge production center, then connect different parts of Horn Africa, like here, Barbara, Zayla, and other centers. We have evidence which exists now, a paper, a manuscript written on old Arab paper from Zayla. It is kept in one Persian library. he mentioned at the end, at the colophon, at the end of the text, this manuscript was published, handwritten in Saylac, where we are. It's an old tradition. So all this area is connected. People are well educated.
Yeah, I can understand the passion and everything because there are a lot of resourceful materials that you have got engaged with, and definitely we'll come back to them. But because we don't have all the day, and we can talk about this forever, but to bring into context what we are talking about, saying there are a lot of resources and there has to be an initiative, what did we actually do, and what were the things that we have covered, just to give us an example or sampling the case of the Jimma manuscripts research that we are still engaged in. So if you could tell us, you already mentioned you will come back to them, what did we find in Jimma? What does it entail? What does it tell us in terms of the research that we have to engage more on?
In West Ethiopia, we almost identified manuscript production centers, around 8 centers. As many of you know that Jimma or the Gibeah state is the last Islamic sultanate in the history of Ethiopia. So in this region, I just have visited 2 sites or 2 states from the 5 Gibeah state, that is Jimma and Goma, but the people say themselves we are Gomai. So in these centers, we have discovered 8 manuscript production centers. Among these, we have visited 1 government institution, that is Jimma Jimma Museum. And apart from this, we have also visited teaching learning centers. That is Islamic teaching learning centers. We got 2 centers, and the rest one are the private collections. In this collection, we uncovered around 190 manuscripts written both in Arabic and local language, also called Ajami literature. I hope you have some understanding about the Ajami literature. Ajami is a terminology that refers to non-Arab languages. The script is originally Arab, but the language is non-Arabs, like the African languages. So the the Ajami literatures that we found in this site is Afan Oromo and Amharic. Majority of them are Manzuma or Panegrics. So this is so very interesting. The localizing of literatures into the local language or indigenous language. By the way, apart from the influence of Arabic languages or imported literatures, there are so many indigenous literature in this region, particularly regarding the history, regarding the chronicle, and so related things. What are the you may ask me, what are the typologies of those literatures? We have several types of the literatures in the region, both secular and non-secular. Secular subjects are like philosophy, astronomy, like in common and the rest of the world, and other issues. Then, others are religious texts like Tawheed, Quran, Tafsir, Maqasid, and etc. As I mentioned, from the 8 production centers, we have discovered around 119. I hope in the next step, we will visit the rest 3 sites, that is Goma, Limmo in area, and Saka.